into the record meanwhile. This is item number 14, an application for certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 15-2522, block 821, lot 11 and 12, 51 to 53 West 19th Street in the Ladies Mile Historic District. A converted dwelling built in 1854 and redesigned in the early 20th century commercial style by Samuel Roth in 1924, and a converted dwelling built in 1854 and redesigned in the early 20th century commercial style by Burke and Olsen in 1927. The application is to demolish 2 buildings and construct a new 14-story building. Zone C6-4A.
Commissioners and the Waterloo Preservation staff. The item before you today is for 51 through 53 West 19th Street in the Ladies Mile Historic District. The 2 buildings are located on the north side of the street between 5th and 6th Avenues. For your reference, these are the existing conditions photographs. The buildings were originally built in the 1850s and redesigned in the 1920s as part of the redevelopment of the district from residential to commercial use. The Ladies Mile Historic District Designation Report describes the buildings as being early 20th century commercial style. The proposal is to demolish these 2 buildings and construct a new 14-story building. The project representative, Valerie Campbell, is here to further explain the proposal.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Valerie Campbell. I'm special counsel at Kramer Levin, and we're land use counsel to the owner of the 2 buildings. This application consists of 2 parts. First, a request to demolish 2 style buildings in the Ladies Mile Historic District, and second, an application for a new building on the newly created site. We are certainly aware that it is rare for the Commission to approve the demolition of buildings that are given a style in the Historic District report. However, in this instance, we think this request deserves careful consideration for several reasons. First, these 2 buildings are not particularly distinguished by virtue of their architecture. Their assigned style, early 20th century commercial, describes the building's use and age. It essentially indicates that these buildings are utilitarian structures with little actual architectural merit or emphasis. Second, their history is undistinguished. Their origin as mid-19th century row houses is completely obscured by the nondescript facades that were badly slapped on in 1924 and 1927. The post-World War I development phase in the district that is not called out for its being significant for architectural development. This stage of the development of the district is also outside of the Civil War to World War I period of commercial architecture that is exemplified by the significant buildings in the historic district. Third, these buildings are lacking in integrity and have significant structural impairments. While they could be repaired, what will be achieved is the retention of 2 nondescript masonry facades on an entirely new building behind. We think this would waste an opportunity to create a better and more appropriate work of architecture in the Ladies Mile Historic District. The new building that is proposed has been carefully designed to reference the history of the historic district in the block. It does not maximize the full area available, and it will also require a special permit pursuant to Section 74-712 which is a lengthy and costly process, in order to create a massing that is appropriate to the historic district. We submit that the quality of the new building is a valid consideration when the Commission is reviewing a request to demolish an existing building, particularly when the existing buildings have so little merit. Moreover, when the approval of the demolition is linked to the appropriateness of the new building, this approval cannot be cited as either a blank check or precedent for future demolition applications. In 1971, Harmon Goldstone, the Landmarks chairman, wrote that the growth and change must occur in New York City's historic districts if they are to remain vital parts of a dynamic organism. He added that a new building should also be as good an expression of the architecture of our own period as the best of its predecessors were of theirs. We believe that this application offers the Commission an opportunity to approve a building that will advance the history and architecture of the Ladies Mile Historic District, and which will ultimately contribute more to the historic district than the two undistinguished and totally unremarkable buildings that exist today. For that, I will give you Henry Smith Miller, who can discuss both the existing buildings and the new buildings that is being proposed.
Well, thank you very much. That's a lot to follow. So actually, a lot of my work is already accomplished in posing or describing this project to you. I've been in this room before, and each time I come here, it's always an interesting experience as a designer to propose architecture to the Landmarks Committee. This is the first time, of course, we were opposed to the situation of having to demolish two buildings. I'm going to take you through our design process. Is this in line? How do I make this go forward? Okay. Well, let's go to this. We did a little history, in fact, quite a lot of it, and we found some images. This is actually a story about number 47, and 49 and 51. And today we're discussing 51 and 53. And we found originally, this is actually 49, and this is one of the buildings that we'll be talking about possibly demolishing today. This is 51. Before the new facade was applied. You can see the same building here. We only have kind of half of it. But we've discovered that there's this history of actually changing new facades, adjusting, and altering previous kinds of architecture. So part of our application is our own design process that actually emulates the historical design process that preceded our design process. Also there's the issue of proportion and so on. So the usual research about the famous tax map photographs, we found that actually 53 in this condition, you can see has 3 windows here, which one would think were original to the pre-1940s veneer, but they're not actually. You can see they're quite different, and in fact, in the tax map photographs, the second commercial floor had more glass in it. So I'm going to take you through a little analysis of what's there now, what we believe was original, what's changed, and what remains. This is a collage that we put together. You can see the taxis cut in half. And it's more a diagram about geography. The first thing we did was we looked at the tax map photograph. And we learned that everything below a particular line here, where Christian from my office found some flashing, is actually new, as is the storefront here. And careful inspection of the lintels and the brick on 51 found a lot of replacement, because the steel lintels that were holding up the brick were replaced sometime during its career. The next one is when you consider the glass, which is not insulated, the sash, which are not thermal break, we'd have to replace all that material with contemporary glass, and it would look the same, but it would be new. So finally, when you add up all of the things that are missing or that would have to be replaced, we find that less than 37% of the original fabric remains. Here's some details. This is lintel replacement. And here's this famous moment when, actually below this point, brick was added. The biggest surprise came to us when we looked at the rear part of the building, and I know Landmarks is very concerned about actually courtyards and the internal spaces. And we found that Garden State brick had been there, that's a joke. But some previous owner, not our owner, who's closed on it owns it relatively recently, there's a lot of testimony saying that Hammett, our client, had let this building go and decay under his ownership. Actually, that's not true. I think he took possession in, they went to contract in 2006 or 8, but the closing wasn't until later. So you can see testimony later from the public saying that Hammett purposely let this thing go to hell. Well, he didn't. This is interesting for me because when we looked at the back of the building, we found that the second wife of brick had been actually cut off and a cement stucco put on the back of the building and then printed to look like brick. So I'd say that while the windows may be original, of course, because they are in the second wife, certainly the surface of the courtyard is lost to history as well. It's rare that I would show an interiors picture of a building, and I'm not showing you for the reasons of the interiors, but it describes a condition which I find remarkably strange. The windows which were added in the early 20th century commercial style, obviously the architect of that project didn't pay any attention to the original floor elevations of the single-family house that was there. So to accommodate the failure of the coordination between these two architectures, or these two buildings, there are steps that occur in the floor of the existing building. And I realize that's not a Landmarks purview. I'm really talking about the mismatch of the new facade from the outside onto the previously existing townhouse. The issues of decay and collapse are self-evident here. We have a report from Silman, and there's a representative from their office here if you have questions. Basically, the majority of this building would have to be replaced due to the superloading of the existing residential structure by commercial goods over time, the deflection. There are lots of improvements that have been made that made it worse, but that's not Landmarks. So, as designers, we looked at the neighborhood, and we found there's a lot of excellent design. There are some good, tall, skinny buildings, which fortunately found themselves on a parking lot. We did not. And then there's restoration. There's a remarkable architecture. So I thought, gee, would it be possible for us to fashion a contemporary building which would be made out of durable materials, lasting more than the brick, the sand brick that's on these buildings, that would be designed around tenets which are current to this year, or this generation, or this century. By that I mean 21st century. So I'm going to present you a building that has decorative features, it has proportions, it has window openings that all borrow from the tradition of the Beaux-Arts or neoclassicism, but they're rendered in contemporary argument. After all, I'm a 21st century architect now. We did a little explanation of the history of our process. This is the beginning of time when there were 4 little townhouses. They were all pushed back. When the first, we don't know whether the sequence is correct, but the idea is here. When this went from a single-family dwelling, and they decided they needed a bigger storefront, make a little money, help pay for the mortgage, the storefronts were added. Another one's added, and you can see in this particular project the lower story, adding the commercial use. Finally, we get to R2, and you can see that the whole thing is filled out by one layer. Our design posits that we push one back again, the way historically one had come out. We raise them both up, left and right, 53 and 51, and then we add a tall, thin tower that emulates the Bay 47. And this is a picture of our massing, which, by the way, terminates a whole series of buildings east of our location with a kind of frame that brings the edge down to grade. Everybody always loves to see the architect's sketch. I'm going to try to speed up. This happened in Buffalo at 4 a.m. We were having a terrible time trying to figure out what to do. And as you can see, I began to play with the little buildings here. I call it the cha-cha-cha effect. These are the drawings that resulted from that sketch. We're very concerned about matching the existing height, 47, and actually taking our cues from our building from our neighbor. This is what we call the project elements. And as you can see, our 53 borrows heavily from the previous 53. Our 51 actually borrows from 47, the tower. And their massing moves in and out from the street to create kind of spaces here that once existed when these were actually single-family dwellings. So we think we're removing ourselves from this kind of cardboard addition that had been put on to look like a commercial building on front of actually what was a residential building, and bring some life and vitality back to 19th Street. This is a collage. We spent a lot of time looking at the texture and the light and the shadow and the material. We actually mapped photographs on 3D models. This is what I was talking about, that we have louvers here which cover kind of a library inside our building that deal with the fineness, what I call the fineness of the detail of the Beaux-Arts cornice. These are drawings of the projects per se, taken by themselves. There are two different scales operating. Actually, there are three in our project. The what I call the townhouse, the tower, and the side wall. And you can see the smaller windows and smaller running bond of the limestone that we intend to use. The bigger openings of what is a loggia. The glass is actually recessed from a balcony. And then the side walls, which have here this form of brise-soleil, which is a 21st century way of thinking about controlling the environment from the western sun. This is the east elevation, this is the court elevation. So we think that this will actually add, as I said before, vitality. Certainly will add housing units. Certainly it will replace buildings which are in a pretty sad shape. We're very concerned about how this thing reaches the street. So we maintain the kind of storefront with a wrapped door with a, I can't think of what this is called. You can sit on it. It's a, what? It's called a, I don't know. Anyway, it's more conditioned like the restaurant over here. And in fact, the lobby to our taller building has a double height feature. But what's important that I would like you to see is that we're very concerned about the aspects of the design environment that we're bringing to this particular place on this street. And we plan to have all of our lighting to be indirect so that the nighttime life emulates the daytime. Each piece of this building was designed around 21st century concerns: environment, solar, load, privacy, all sorts of untangible and tangible aspects of living in the city. We feel that restoring the 19th century residential buildings that have been turned into Class B apartments actually isn't advancing the quality of life or the quality of the street or the quality of the city. And that's the reason why I'm here actually as architect for the project, and it's a big risk, of course. We know that this is never, very rarely done before. So we are very interested actually in thinking about the southern part of the building, where we have a very small balcony and the glass is recessed from the opening, and I call it a loggia, because we want to know what it's like to be inside this building, to live, and to have privacy with regard to who's across the street. Our work was pretty deep about the aspect of the sun, so that in the late August afternoon, we do not have a solar load. So we get a kind of a situation where the architecture is not a glass box. It's a box that's been tempered by contemporary architectural thinking. Don't worry if you break the model, it's not a problem. I did it already. We did some plans to make sure when we worked this building up from the outside in because we realized the context was important. We actually made some plans to see if you could get some apartments in them. We did a whole FAR analysis and we went to the city planning. This is something you should know, that city planning has no objection to this project going forward, provided, of course, that this august committee gives it a certificate of appropriateness. There was some worry that the city planning would not allow demolition without that certificate. But anyway, we're here probably not to get the certificate, but to discuss the issue. This is a bird's eye view, and you can see how this building actually aligns with the face of 55, and our larger building aligns with the setback of 49. This is the last picture, and I guess I'd be open to comments or questions.
Okay, questions?
One question.
Yes, Joan.
Is it all apartments or is it hotel?
Right now, it's apartments. That means we have a bigger setback in the rear yard, which I prefer, because I'm interested in light and air. Yeah, right? Hammett, where's Hammett?
Right now.
At this moment, it's been designed as a residential building. It's in the rear yard's conformance with the code. The only issue would be the street wall. That would be a variance.
And the building, if it was built, would require a special permit from city planning for the street wall waiver, and the use of the building would be one of the things that was reviewed in environmental review.
Okay, any other questions before we go to testimony? Okay, thank you. Yes, sure.
In terms of the existing buildings, your bottom line is that you're saying that they can't be used, you don't think, for anything as good for the street as this, is that what you're saying? Because structurally, they're there, the existing buildings. They may not be, the highest examples of fine architecture, whatever, but they are there, they're part of the district, they fit in, but the bottom line on why they must be
All right.
unacceptable.
I think it's a very sad situation. I'm a New Yorker. These buildings were once single-family dwellings. They worked well that way. They were designed like that. There was a lot of pride in them. You can see one of the pictures that we have, that we found. Along came the vicissitudes of the economic crisis. I don't know whether they went to Westchester. I don't know what happened. And they got a facade plastered on them that didn't match them well. All right? That's what happened. And I wish that actually the original integrity, even with the 55 and 49, there's remnants of the original single-family dwellings on the left and the right of our sites. But our facades, and the old facades, have been obliterated with no concern for the existing plan of those buildings. So this is a case of tremendous abuse, I think, of the fabric of the city by somebody other than myself. I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
So that's why I'm here, because I think actually our proposal does more than a simple restoration would manage.
Okay, anyone else before we go to testimony?
One other
Yes,
request.
Joan.
Would it be possible to go back to slide, I guess 18, so that we could look at a few of the elevations when
Oh,
we're
sure.
talking about it?
Well, I didn't want to bore you with kind of architecture stuff. We love these drawings, by the way.
Okay, that's probably the best one.
I talked about the
Okay.
scale change here, right? The relative openings of the lobby. I talked about these are actually windows. There's not a lower here. The glass is at the window. This is pushed back. There's actually a column here which holds the fire stair, and there's a light at the top of it to make we thought about, there's a line here that modulates the entrance. This is one of my favorite drawings. In fact, Michael Licht from our office loves it too. I'm going to use fancy words called Piranesian. The change of scale that we are operating on this building, when you see it from a long distance, like the PSFS building that Lascaz and other modernists did in Philadelphia, you see it from a long distance. So we chose to render the cement stucco which would be the same color as our limestone, to have its expansion joints to produce a kind of super scale inside, large scale. So the building's actually working from very large scale seen across the roofs to the front door of the retail. So, the last thing, it's not a Beaux-Arts building. It's a 21st century building. Its decoration and proportions come from the necessities of shade and sunlight.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, I'm gonna stop.
Okay, testimony, we'll start with Leila Law-Gisico from Community Board 5.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Leila Law-Gisico. I'm the chair of the Landmarks Committee for Manhattan Community Board 5. CB5 voted unanimously to deny the application to demolish two buildings at 51 and 53 West 19th Street. We rarely see applications to demolish landmark buildings, and this application came as a shock to us. We're more used to applicants who cherish and value the historic character of their properties. CB5 found no merits to the application, as you can see in the resolution we passed. The architect explained to us that demolition was the path chosen because restoring the buildings was not desirable. He qualified any attempt to restore the buildings as Disneyification. The owner has alluded also to financial hardship. The argument is surprising. The Ladies Mile Historic District is home to a vibrant retail neighborhood. Its historic character has attracted Class A commercial tenants, such as the French luxury conglomerate LVMH. Residential developers have unlocked the financial value of the district over the past 10 years with amazing success. According to a Bloomberg.com article in 2014, the Flatiron District is the neighborhood that scores the highest median price per square foot in the whole country, with a median price of $1,818 per square foot. CB5 is urging the commissioners to turn down the application. We are also urging the applicant to come to his senses and to develop a plan to restore rather than destroy these two buildings. By doing so, no one will suggest that they are turning 19th Street into Disneyland. We look forward to working with the applicant on a reasonable restoration plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Barbara Zay. Jack Taylor next.
Barbara Zay of the Historic Districts Council. HDC is opposed to the demolition of 51 and 53 West 19th Street, both for the damage it would cause the Ladies Mile Historic District and for the dangerous precedent it would create for buildings in other historic districts. These two buildings were constructed as dwellings in 1854 and both redesigned in the 1920s for commercial and/or manufacturing use. Such a history is very much in keeping with the Ladies Mile Historic District. In fact, the designation report lists converted dwellings as a building type in the district, along with residential construction, office buildings, store and loft buildings, and retail and department stores. The report points out that after World War I, the shopping district had moved north, and the area's focus shifted to manufacturing. The 1916 zoning resolution had prohibited the construction of tall buildings on mid-block sites, and so instead the surviving residential buildings were converted. Converted dwellings are obviously a part of the fabric of the district, and these two nicely designed buildings are good examples of this typology. Admittedly, 51 and 53 have been neglected over recent years, but the focus should be on their restoration and not their demolition. Fortunately, the Commission already has precedent for the retention of historic buildings that reflect the character of their district. In 2010, the Commission denied an application at 558 Broadway in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, which would have destroyed the garage building's 1920s decorative brick facade. The applicant tried to argue that the building did not reflect the 19th century feel of the district and so could be radically redesigned. Commissioners roundly disagreed, pointing out that the building was designated as part of the historic district and its destruction was a, quote, non-starter. In 2012, the Commission saw a proposal for the demolition of 70 Henry Street, a one-story 19th century building much altered over the decades in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. Commissioners debated the amount of historic fabric that would be lost and in the end could not approve of such destruction. Since then, the applicant has been working on a proposal to retain the structure at the base for as a base for the new building. The proposed new building for 51 through 53 West 19th Street would be a sorry replacement for these two historic structures. The recessed first floor would interrupt the street wall and create a forecourt, a configuration not typical to the streetscape of the Ladies Mile. The west half of the building attempts to resemble a row house, but lacks any details or articulation. It only sadly reminds one of a stripped, neglected building that stands as testament for the need of the LPC. The rest of the structure lacks the varied fenestration and vibrancy seen in other tall buildings around this district. That is all beside the point, though. 51 and 53 are clearly buildings whose history, design, and materials are important parts of the Ladies Mile Historic District. Their loss would be a detriment to this district and pave a dangerous path for many other buildings throughout the city. We urge the Landmarks Commission to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Jack Taylor, and then Christabel Goff would be next.
I'm Jack Taylor for the Drive to Protect the Ladies Mile District. Quite simply, this application threatens the integrity of the Ladies Mile Historic District. The buildings involved are legitimate examples of the Ladies Mile's architectural and commercial development in the years following World War I. They have housed businesses characteristic of the district: milliners, embroiderers, furriers. This proposal is not unlike an application 9 years ago that sought to demolish 16 West 18th Street. That proposal was wisely denied by the Commission. The result has been the restoration of the building and its return to usefulness as a successful component of the Ladies Mile Historic District. As for the proposed new 14-story replacement structure in this application, our comments will be few because we hope it will never be approved. Suffice it to say, though, that it seems to have few decorative or ornamental elements in a district renowned for its elaborate Beaux-Arts and Neo-Renaissance beauties, and that it would feature a forecourt, thus breaking the street wall characteristic of the district. The applicant has commissioned the celebrated structural engineer Robert Silman to perform an existing conditions survey of the buildings proposed for demolition. The survey is frank in its description of the largely interior deterioration that has been allowed to accumulate over recent years. But it is also relevant to cite a statement made by Mr. Silman 8 years ago when he was honored as a Landmarks Lion by the Historic Districts Council. What Mr. Silman said was this, and I quote, "Almost no building today is beyond salvaging. There are ways of working around any damage, of reusing any building that seems hopeless, as long as there's sufficient will and community support," unquote. The community support is here, Commissioners. The will is up to you and the applicant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Christabel Goff, and then Louis Lanzano. After, no, just next, sorry. Thank you.
Christabel Goff for the Society for the Architecture of the City. Moving towards the 50th anniversary of the Landmarks Law, much evidence of what it can and cannot do is before us. One of the undoubted successes is preventing assemblage in historic districts, that is, demolition of groups of small historic buildings to create sites for massive commercial projects. Historic districts are not the place for that activity. With 96% of the city undesignated, the real estate industry really could afford to reconsider its demolition expectations in protected areas. Built as townhouses and reimagined as small loft buildings when the neighborhood turned commercial, these buildings are a recognized and characteristic building type in the district. They are not alien to the architectural character of the district, and there is no unsafe building order. Demolition would undercut the administration of the law and take a significant step towards rendering historic district designation worthless. Discussion of a design posited on improper demolition is pointless. The whole project should be rethought, or better still, abandoned.
Louis Lanzano, and then Susan Finley will be next.
Good afternoon. My name is excuse me, Louis Lanzano. I reside at 49 West 19th Street. I'm an artist who moved in 1972, so I'm going on my 43rd year at that location. You know, I took issue, I was at the community board meeting a few weeks ago when the application was denied, and I spoke there. I just feel that there are several things that I would object to. I think, first of all, the building I'm in is like about an 1870s building, and just to be next door to the type of construction that I see that's planned, a 14-story building right next to me, right there I see a quality of life thing, the noise, the possible integrity of an old building like that being compromised because of the construction that would have to take place right next door. So that alone is very disturbing to me. Also, the neighborhood, since I've been there since 1972, has dramatically changed already in terms of foot traffic, the commercial things going on, conversion of larger buildings into residential dwellings. The area already outpaces Times Square during the rush hour as far as people, cars, etc. So to even add more people with a larger 14-story building it boggles my mind in terms of the quality of my life and probably other people on the block. And the other thing that I find that doesn't make a lot of sense, and I pointed this out at the other meeting, is that the building 51 and 53, especially 51, has for the last 3 to 4 years gone through major renovations. Major. We're talking completely gutting of several floors. The second floor just recently was leased out to a maintenance company who just signed a 3-year lease. So he'd be pretty shocked to know that they plan on tearing that down. BOROUGH, which is in 53 West 19th Street, still has 8 years left on their lease. And part of the argument was that these buildings are in terrible shape, ready to fall down. I was in today, the buildings. The second floor has been completely renovated. The hallways completely renovated. The third floor completely renovated, new kitchen, bathroom, appliances, ready to get rented. Hundreds of thousands of dollars have already been spent in the last 3.5 years on at least 51. And so the idea, and the area that was shown where the rotted out beams, that's one part of the 4th floor in the back. That's it. The rest of the building pretty much is about as sound as any other 100-year-old plus building would be. And basically, that's all I have to say because I see my time is up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan Finley. Michelle Golden next.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Susan Finley. I'm a director of the Flatiron Alliance. I represent the community in the Ladies Historic District, and I'm here to tell you, first of all, that thank you very much. 19th Street doesn't need you to bring them back to life. 19th Street is alive and well, as is the entire Flatiron neighborhood, and that's thanks to the integrity of the Ladies Historic District. People who came here, there are some who lived here before it got that qualification, but the people who came here and the people who are living here and the people who invested their hard-earned money to live and work here did so because they want to live in a neighborhood that cares about the historic quality of where they live. They love this community, and they love the fact that, at least in our community, some concern for history and landmark status actually trumped money and ironically created money, which all of you know. So the idea now of dismantling or threatening the integrity of the Ladies Historic Mile by allowing someone to look for buildings that they go out and buy. Nobody put a gun to this man's head and said, buy derelict buildings. Oh my. He looked for those buildings. He told the landlord that they had to be delivered empty. We were told this by his architect at the community board. He waited for that. He took delivery. And then the next step was, How do I now make money on this? Well, the best way to make money is demolish them. And to that I say, if you allow a precedent like this, you are signaling to the developers that money trumps history. And that already is happening all over the city. Let's preserve what little history we have worked so hard to preserve. Also, I wanted to say, I'm sorry, let me just look at my notes. As far as the building is concerned, I hope it will never even be discussed beyond this today, but there's a little sleight of hand here that makes it look like 2 buildings, when in actuality, it's really one 14-story building. It's wide, it goes behind the smaller building. Let me just say, hold on a second, I'm sorry. As to structural issues, I think that they've been discussed. I don't think there are huge structural issues, because if there are, the landlord would be liable for the people who are in those buildings today. So I ask you, don't open a door. If you close the door, they're going to come through a hole in the window. If you close the window, they're going to come through a crack in the building. And the next thing we know, developers are going to be looking for ways to take apart the Ladies Historic District. Please, on behalf of those of us who live and work there, don't do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Michelle Golden, and then Leo Blackman.
Hello, I have testified many times before. Nice to see you. Unfortunately, we have another occasion for me to be here. I am Michelle Golden. I am a director of the Flatiron Alliance. We've been around for about 15 years. Ladies Mile has a sense of distinction. Put this up a little so you can hear me. The variety of buildings and the variety of heights are part of its heritage. We're not interested in a seamless interface of buildings. The various building heights do something else. It makes it a neighborhood, and it gives it the character of what is intrinsically the Ladies' Mile. Plus, airspaces are very important to us over these smaller buildings, as we attested to as we were inundated with nightclubs and noise. It seems that the noise gets dispersed by the lower buildings having airspace over them. Instead of having seamless interfaces of buildings, we don't have noise bouncing off the walls and the glass and all of that, which becomes a crescendo on some blocks. It's intensified. So we like the airspaces. Plus, it lets more sunlight into the neighborhood, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous number of blocks. So what I say is derelict buildings are not a problem. If a building is allowed to deteriorate and somebody can replace it with a 14-story tower, yay. But not in the Ladies' Mile. That's a signal to me that I deem this area so important. I'll do anything to get a building here and put in a 14-story tower that frankly is nothing. It's not a glass box, it's just a box. We fought for landmarks designation. We are not going to let these people demolish it 1 or 2 buildings at a time. I am in real estate, okay? I work in real estate. I'm all for development. But one of the things I'm really for, and you've put out numerous reports on this, is that landmarking enhances the value of our property. I know that. I've lived there 30 years. Okay, my apartment is worth much more because it's in a landmarked area. And the reports of the Landmarks Commission are brilliant. It's true. Now, there are people in real estate who would knock you down and say, it's not true. I'm not one of them. I live by working and, selling, renting apartments, townhouses, lofts, anything. But it does increase the value, so bravo to you that you're helping us. Furthermore, I've lived here for 30 years and seen this area become an eclectic landmark environment. I call it, like Candide, the best of all possible worlds. I urge you, please do not allow this application to go forward. Kill it, stop it, and make them renovate the building and make it into something that fits better and looks better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Leo Blackman, and then Lacan Cole.
Chair Tierney and Commissioners. I'm Leo Blackman, Vice President of the Drive to Protect the Ladies Mile, and an architect who walks through the historic district daily. 51 and 53 West 19th Street are typical Ladies Mile structures, early 20th century conversions of row houses as commercial use eclipsed residential in the neighborhood. Their condition is also typical of the district. Failing roofing, windows in need of repair, rusted lintels, and mismatched brick. All of these conditions are easily reparable, but in this case, the owner had neglected to perform basic maintenance on his property over a very long period of time. Perhaps when the decay becomes really pronounced, he'll be allowed to sell them to someone who'll tear them down, build a tower, and make a windfall. I hope the Commission won't establish a precedent for the district by rewarding the previous owner for his negligence and sloth. The proposed replacement makes some gestures towards its context, but these are tepid and confused. The 5-story form of 53 West 19th Street is recreated on one side of the lot, with a 15-story setback tower occupying the site of number 51. The tower is faced with a limestone grid and rises to a height of its tall neighbor to the east. However, the lower portion, faced with gray stucco, has none of the warmth or detail of even the modest building it replaces. On inspection, the taller facade is merely a screen for the black glass box behind, as is a shading device tacked onto its west side. Coursing of stone or stucco has no apparent relation to the pattern of openings. These light-colored materials stop 1 or 2 stories above grade, and the inset storefront is a dark void with no articulation. Fortunately, the architect directs us to the penthouse mechanical louvers and assures us that these, quote, reference the fineness and detail of the 19th century neighbor. The bar must be set very low. This building sadly does not contribute more to the district than those it seeks to demolish. Please don't allow that to happen.
Thank you. Lacan Cole.
Lake and Cole Municipal Art Society. The Municipal Art Society is a private, nonprofit membership organization that advocates for intelligent urban planning, design, and preservation through education, dialogue, and advocacy. The MAS Preservation Committee received a presentation from the architectural firms Smith, Miller, and Hawkinson Architects on the proposal to demolish 2 commercial buildings located at 51 and 53 West 19th Street within the Ladies Mile Historic District, designated 1989. The committee appreciated Mr. Smith-Miller's thoughtful design and presentation. However, the committee believes the demolition of these 2 historic buildings is inappropriate and will detract from the quality of the Ladies Mile Historic District for the following 2 reasons. First, the Commission's designation report describes 51 and 53 West 19th Street as early 20th century commercial style. The Commission determined that these modest buildings help to tell the story of Ladies Mile because they are characteristic of one of the district's 4 major development periods. While the facade of the buildings in question have been significantly modified over time, this is not a compelling argument for demolition. At the time of the designation, the overall area had a gritty quality consistent with the condition of these buildings today. While the buildings would benefit from restoration, even in their existing condition, they contribute to the quality and history of the district. As the designation report clearly notes, the vernacular, industrial, and commercial character on the side streets, in contrast to the Avenue Palaces, all contribute to the area's unique character. Second, the committee asks that this proposal not be considered in isolation. We recognize, of course, that the replacement buildings is proposed to only be as tall as its loft neighbor, but this is the first of what, if approved, could become many applications in the district. Our concern relates to the precedent of this proposal. Allowing for demolition and replacement of 51 and 53 West 19th Street, intact reminders of a contributing development period, opens the door for future development proposals to demolish and replace similar district buildings, of which there are a fair number. The cumulative effect of numerous replacements would change the collective sense of place on Ladies Miles, particularly on the side streets. This decision will also prompt developers to look for analogous opportunities in the city's other historic districts without the Landmarks Commission setting an overall policy direction. In addition, In addition, the committee believes that these buildings have been neglected for a number of years. Relying on poor building maintenance of these structures as justification for their demolition will only incentivize the warehousing and deterioration of historic structures. The committee recommends restoration of the 2 historic buildings, perhaps with an addition more appropriate to the buildings and the district. We appreciate the opportunity to comment and hope that our comments are useful to the Landmarks Preservation Commission.
Okay, thank you. Any further testimony? Anybody who hasn't signed up wishes to speak? Okay, with that, you have the opportunity to comment, respond any way you wish right now.
Well, I'll be very quick. Obviously there are a lot of differences of opinions, and I think some statements of fact have been incorrect, but I don't want to address them. The issue is very simply, we find these 2 buildings to be in a situation of stress, and that the additions that have been made to them, those betterments have actually made them worse. As I said, I lament the loss of a single-family dwelling, and what we are intending to put forward here is a contribution to the future of the district, a contribution to bring viable housing, bring the same kinds of play of light and shadow that goes on, a lot of attention to detail, and of course environmental concerns. We want to be a good citizen of 19th Street. Our client is on 19th Street. It seems that nobody wants us to fix the buildings really. But anyway, it's a pleasure to present, and I'm looking forward to your discussions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me just start out and thank everyone for the presentation. Thank the community and the participation in this in the hearing today. Informative all the way around. And my thought is, beginning this, that these are contributing buildings in an important in an historic district in New York City, and it's the obligation of this commission to protect those buildings that are contributing, and to lose them or to allow them to be lost would, in my opinion, here specifically diminish the sense of place of this district. And I also believe that this is not a condemnation of the use of these buildings as they now exist. I think I haven't seen anything that shows me that they're not structurally sound and that they can't be repaired, reused, and adaptively and creatively reused. So therefore, on all those counts, I think that these buildings are to be protected, and it's our obligation, my obligation, as I see it, to provide that protection. Further discussion, Joan?
Yeah, there's so many sides to this. And first of all, I want to start by saying that the presentation was really great, and the building is beautiful. And I just feel that it is our duty, I have to agree with Bob, to protect these buildings. And somebody that can design this kind of a building can also come up with another solution incorporating the existing buildings. And as much as I think this is beautiful, I would love to see it somewhere else, in a place that it's not interfering with the Ladies Mile Historic District, because it is beautiful, and the thought and the intellectual reasoning behind it was very special, and to listen to it was extremely rewarding. But I feel I have to agree with Bob. I do feel that these buildings need to be protected, and I think that another solution is really necessary. But thank you for the presentation.
Michael Devonshire?
I also agree that the design of the new building is quite interesting. It's got all the things that we look for in contemporary buildings, the brise soleil, the rain screens, loggias, and I agree with Joan that in another location it would be a fantastic building. I think fundamentally for me, what I was grappling with was whether or not the incursion of this building in this district would be an improvement, and I think that would be debatable. The demolition of the existing buildings would certainly diminish the district, And I think, as I said before, more than that, the staff at this commission, I consider to be the non plus ultra of Landmarks Preservation Commission staffs. And the fact that these buildings, as deficient as they might be seen by some, were included in this district and remain in this district says to me that if I permitted the demolition of them, it would be an insult to the staff of this commission, and I won't do that.
Well, I think that the two buildings that you're proposing to demolish, while they might not be representative of what's being built today around the city, and they might be viewed as, you know, underusage of this site, they are in fact representative of a type of building that is found in the district, and they are of the type of building that is the reason that the district was designated by this commission. So in the light of those facts, I don't see any possible way we could approve their demolition. They, as I said, they might not be the highest and best use of the site, but that's not what we're charged with at the Landmarks Commission, and so I can't approve their demolition.
Roberta.
Obviously, by what we decided on the last case where we did decide that a building could be demolished in a historic district, there are some times and some reasons and some evidence that can convince us that that has to happen. But I think that here this case wasn't as strong. And so on one hand, we're looking at two buildings, whether or not they can be demolished, and on the other hand, we're looking at a nice shiny new replacement already done for the site. But it seems that the connection is that the reason to demolish is to be able to build the new building, which I think for us on the commission is in itself a problem, because our allegiance is to the district and to make sure that we're not destroying buildings that don't need to be destroyed, and that there's no good reason to do that. And so I think in this case that there was no case really made for why the buildings should be demolished, other than we get a new building. And so I think that couldn't find that that's an appropriate action.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I concur with some of the other commissioners' remarks. In this case, these buildings, what was presented, it just doesn't rise to the evidentiary standard that we require to permit demolition. The fact that there have been changes in the lower floors or the windows, or would be changes in the windows, if we were to use those as standards, we would have innumerable buildings that we would say, these, you know, we can demolish these just because there have been some changes to the facades. The fact that they're not exceptional architecture also doesn't mean that you automatically would say we're going to be able to demolish these. As long as they are contributing buildings in a historic district, we really have to have a high standard to permit the demolition of the buildings, and I just haven't seen the evidence here. As Jones said, you know, I can see coming up with something that might add to these buildings and you know, increase them in some fashion, but I don't see just losing the entire fabric that we have here, because there's no justification that I can find at this point.
Okay.
Wow. I found the presentation very interesting, and the comments both raised by the testimony and by the applicants. I guess I'm on the fence on this one. I don't share the ironclad feelings that the buildings, simply because they bear the designation of a style, merit, in all cases, retention. I think when you create a district, you go through a process of historical categorization that simply because there is a style to attach to a building, whether it is good or bad within that style, does not necessarily mean that it rises to the level of individual preservation. We have now a mechanism for saying, well, that's a no-style building, and therefore transmitting the message to the owner and to others that this building does not necessarily merit preservation. But I think that there are gradations of building qualities within the notion of a style. I mean, there can be a very poorly done Victorian building and a really spectacular Victorian building, and simply because it bears the title because of its provenance, its age, a detail or two, doesn't necessarily, for me, mean that it is automatically, because it bears that title, meritorious of preservation. So in looking at these two buildings, they seem to, they have been assigned a style, and therefore they should be looked at carefully. I personally don't think that they really, for me, contribute significantly to the district, but I'm happy to be wrong on that. What's curious for me is that, and I share everyone's feeling that the building proposed is a beautiful, beautiful, thoughtful, carefully done building that, in my opinion, would contribute to the district. The funny thing about it, though, is that I don't see that the design would change barely one bit if you preserved the 53 building. You're putting it back. The composition is of a tower that is set back in front of a building that is meant to emulate in scale, proportion, fenestration, a building that it is replacing. It is at the same plane, it is more or less the same height, it has, a similar kind of fenestration, 3 across. I think that a preservation approach could, at least for the 53 building, work with this application without a whole lot of ado. Whereas I understand that my opinion might be the minority in terms of the building, and I think it kind of, for me, prompts a consideration of what the meaning of a designated building with a style is in a district where you have different qualities. I think here it's clear that it's not going to be approved as is, and I would just hope that the applicant could, as you'd said, Joan, try to kind of take it and run with it. There's certainly the quality of applicant here to make something good.
Okay. Let me just conclude, because I want to be clear that the issue of style is not determinative for me in this case or any other cases. It's rather the contribution to the district, the sense of place, as I said, which I believe would be diminished, the expression of the evolution of the district, the historic evolution, and a lot of other factors. It's not just the individual style of the particular building or buildings that we're discussing. But for all those reasons, I think it's clear that there's little support for moving forward certainly on the demolition side, but I think there's been discussion and thought about other options for these sites in terms of adaptive reuse and whatnot, but I leave that to everybody else on the other side over there to think about. But with that, we'll take no action, of course, and close the hearing today with a motion and a second. Without objection, the hearing is closed. Thank you.